Godfrey beckoned his knight to retreat, allowing Sam to recall his summon. It had not been long since Godfrey awakened Mountain, and the toll was showing. Blackout state had forced Mountain from 30 to an unbelievable 40, and the toll was clear. Godfrey's face was pale, his body trembling. His body felt weaker than usual, his breathing slightly unsteady. It was natural. Most new summoners needed a week, sometimes a month, before their bond strengthened enough to maintain a summon for longer than a few minutes. With time, they could keep their companions for hours, even days. The most powerful summoners could sustain their summons all year, 365 days without rest. But the soul space was a natural cradle, a place where summons recovered and grew. That was why they were always recalled after battle. Cherish the mercy I've shown you today, Godfrey said flatly as he walked past Sam. The upperclassman stood frozen, disbelief carved into his face at the humiliation of his defeat. I was wondering when you'd leave Expelled. A familiar, mocking voice made Godfrey halt. He turned back. His eyes narrowed at Siegfried and Mildred, strolling side by side, while Snow followed silently behind them. Phone in hand, Mildred stretched his hand forward. Quills shot out of his palm, crossing the distance in a split instant. Godfrey barely had time to cross his arms in defense before they pierced into his forearms. He tried to summon Mountain, but dizziness washed over him before he could recover. Siegfried appeared before him in a blur of green. His hands had morphed into jade-like claws, large and gleaming under the sunlight. Those claws clamped over Godfrey's face at terrifying speed. Siegfried slammed his head against the wall. Stone cracked like glass, web-like fractures spreading outward before Godfrey collapsed limply to the ground. Oops, used too much strength. Siegfried laughed, tracting his claws as if nothing had happened. He crouched down beside the unconscious boy, tilting his head with a smirk. I wonder what that Pendragon girl sees in you. Is she into weak boys? Mildred strolled past Sam, who was still stiff and wide-eyed. His gaze lingered on Snow, the calm, silent figure whose mere presence dwarfed everyone else's. Sam's throat tightened. He was a third-year, A40, summoner, yet Snow was already a 65, even a year below. Snow was untouchable. Beside him was Siegfried, rumored to be 46 with defenses rivaling the elite 50 tier, yet still only Snow's subordinate. Watching them crush Godfrey so casually stirred something ugly in Sam's chest. His earlier humiliation began to fade, replaced by a twisted satisfaction. That's right, he's nothing before true talents. Snow, silent as ever, gave Godfrey's unconscious body a dismissive glance. With one sharp kick, he slumped him against the wall like discarded trash, then walked past, scrolling on his phone. Godfrey's blue eyes fluttered open to the face of the school nurse leaning over him. You're awake. I was getting worried, she said, relief softening her tone as he sat up with a groan, touching his sore head. Don't worry. I've healed your wounds. After awakening your summon, your body has already grown tougher, so it wasn't life-threatening. But the shock knocked you unconscious. She spoke gently, yet Godfrey still heard the pity buried in her voice. It made his jaw tighten. Can you apologize to your classmates? She asked, trying to reason with him. You're supposed to be friends. Why are you? Apologize? To people who want me as their lapdog, Godfrey snapped, biting his lip and clenching his fists. He forced a few deep breaths, then lowered his head. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell. Would lashing out at the nurse help? No. He already knew the answer. Others had time. Years to train, to grow alongside their summons. The sophomores had at least 1 year of experience. He hadn't even had 1 day. His blue eyes flickered as he recalled his knowledge. Summons grew slowly in the soul space. Battles accelerated that growth. But the true catalyst was the dungeon core, something only found in green gates. Mountain was still low tier. But if Godfrey could push him to elite tier 40, then, with blackout state, he could match a 50. Mountain's unique weapons gave him the ability to harm even tougher foes. Up to 5 tiers above. That meant one thing. If Mountain reached 40, Godfrey could threaten even a 55 summon. The next day, Mr. Edwin entered the classroom, dropping his book on the desk before facing the students. His sharp eyes settled on the empty seat beside Isolde. "Mr. Godfrey Daniels was severely injured yesterday," he announced. "He'll be taking a few weeks off to recover, but he will return before the ranking competition at the end of this month. Remember, those who make it into the top 3 will have better chances of graduating as valedictorians, and their summons potential will be boosted. Work hard." The class immediately erupted in whispers. The coward ran after a simple head. Bump. Siegfried scoffed loudly. Maldred leaned over, whispering the story to another student, who snickered. "So, he's gone," Isolde thought to herself, her golden-orange eyes glinting coldly as they swept toward Dale and Snow. With that humanoid summon, it was only a matter of time. Sneered the girl Godfrey had defeated in combat class. "Manhattan is a place for the great doll." Not trash, flaunting his father's name. Trash, mocking trash. Dale cut in with a scowl. "Your brother only picked a fight with him because you were beaten by a mere humanoid summon." The girl's face paled. Train, lips snapping shut. She dared to mock Godfrey, but she wouldn't dare to challenge Dale. "Maybe it's because of Isolde," another whispered. "The top boys are furious. She spends time with Godfrey instead of them." The classroom buzzed until Mr. Edwin's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't want to hear another word." He dropped his notes on the lectern, his stern gaze sweeping the room. "Today, we discussed the 2 categories of summons. Chimera and primal. These are the only 2 types of calm." Several sessions later, Chesil left the female bathroom and was about to pass the staff's corridor when a voice made her freeze. "King Tyr." A male voice exclaimed. A king Tyr was detected yesterday." A woman replied, her tone shaken. "At first, the headmaster and I thought it was a mistake, but this morning, the authorities contacted us. Their gauges picked it up too. Yet the student's summon doesn't resemble any king Tyr summon." "Which student?" "It's Godfrey Daniels, the sophomore transfer." "What?" The man's shocked outburst echoed Cecil's own thoughts. She covered her mouth with trembling hands. "Godfrey, a king Tyr. Summoner? Impossible." Her heart raced. King Tyrs were the stuff of nightmares and legends. One had once declared himself a god, and the world had barely stopped him. How could that boy, who couldn't even defend himself, be of such a terrifying rank? When she finally returned to the cafeteria, her eyes instinctively sought Siegfried. He had been the one who humiliated Godfrey. No, it can't be true. She clenched her fists. "A king Tyr? That's absurd." Godfrey awakened a stupid night. Everyone saw it. These gossipers have lost their minds. Though she said that internally, that seemingly stupid knight had defeated her classmate and her elder brother on the same day it was summoned by a boy who had no prior experience as a summoner. Something was wrong. With a traveling bag in one hand, a plain white hood and black pants, Godfrey walked through the airport terminal. Among the hundreds of people moving about, he was nothing special. No one spared him a second glance just as he preferred. It was better if no one recognized him. Unfortunately, he had spoken too soon. From the corner of his left eye, he spotted a group of guys and girls pointing at him as though he was some sort of celebrity. Godfrey shut his eyes and sighed. This was Amazon City, his home, and of course the place where his title as a shame to his parents was most exalted. With such a stain on his name, why wouldn't he leave for Manhattan, a place far away from here? Well, Manhattan hadn't been much better, either. So much for hope. Lifting his gaze to the screen above the terminal, he raised an eyebrow at the words coming out of the mouth of a female news anchor. There has been a spike in the appearance of Green Gate dungeons all over Amazon City, especially in districts of B, K, and L. Citizens are advised to be more careful, especially in abandoned areas. There have been reports of missing persons, so please remain vigilant. Her words made Godfrey squint. Dungeon gates had been part of the world ever since their first appearance, 100 years ago, but that didn't make them any less dangerous, especially a green dungeon gate. There were 3 known types of dungeon gates. The blue gate, nearly permanent, which could be cleared repeatedly without ever closing. Sometimes it even grew larger. The green gate, far more dangerous, which had no indicators. Anyone could wander into it unknowingly, but unlike the blue gate, they could not leave until the dungeon was cleared. And the red gate, a city-wide catastrophe. It was a red gate that had once spewed forth 100,000 orcs, the same disaster his father had faced. With these thoughts weighing on him, Godfrey left the terminal and boarded a taxi which carried him toward his house. Almost everyone in Amazon City knew his street. After a 20-minute drive, he alighted before a massive black gate and high walls covered in lush artificial grass. Lifting his gaze, he found himself staring at the white two-story building with vast glass walls and an aesthetic that would have turned the heads of any passerby. With a beep, the gate slid open, and he stepped into the yard. Before him stretched a 10-foot-tall flower maze that spanned the width and length of the courtyard, the beautiful house lying just beyond. It was an intimidating sight for most, but not for Godfrey. He had been navigating this maze since he could walk. The public, as usual, had it wrong. It wasn't his father who had made the family rich with a gold-producing summon, the reverse was true. His father's summon was the gold-eater colossus, a creature that devoured gold in order to grow stronger. It was his mother who had brought true wealth into the household. Her summon possessed the power to heal all kinds of illnesses and injuries. Even those without limbs had a chance of regrowth if they were treated with the healing water it produced. As long as his mother lived, that water never lost its potency. Her summon was officially classified as high tier, but its utility and value made it equal to, if not greater than, a lord-tier summon. The rich came from every corner of the world to beg for her aid. Desperation, however, bred recklessness. More than once intruders had tried sneaking into their compound. Hence the maze. After several people were found wandering lost for days within it, most had stopped trying. Godfrey passed through the shifting maze with ease and emerged on the other side. Inside he entered a vast sitting room, furnished with black sofas that contrasted beautifully with the pure white walls. At the window stood a brown-haired woman with her back to him. She wore an apron tied around her waist, oven mitts still covering her hands as she held a phone to her ear. "Director, it's my son," she said warmly. "He's on his way here, and I want to surprise him. You know he's been through a lot." "Valentina, it's already been a day," came the thick, stern reply. "There are important people from across the world here at the hospital. Summoners whose lives preserve thousands more. You can't ignore them for a boy who isn't even sick." Valentina frowned. "He's my son. I'm not saying he isn't. But you can't take a week off. The mayor has already sent someone you need to attend to. I expect to see you in a few hours." The call cut. When Valentina turned, she froze. Godfrey stood in the doorway, his expression distorted. He had heard everything. With his sharpened senses and the call set on speaker, how could he not? "I don't like how they use you," Godfrey said, his tone heavy. Valentina softened, stepping close to caress his hair before placing a kiss on his forehead. "I prepared lunch. It's your favorite." Godfrey scoffed, but reluctantly followed her. After lunch he escorted her outside with Victoria, the tall suit-clad housekeeper whose trousers accentuated her long, powerful legs. "Victoria, take care of him for me," Valentina said before stepping into her car. The maze shifted, opening a clear path for her departure. Once she was gone, Godfrey returned to the dining room, Victoria quietly following. "Will you still be eating?" she asked, gathering what remained of his lunch. Godfrey shook his head, watching as she carried it away. He hated how his mother was being used, her summon reduced to a tool, her life dictated by others. It could take her days of constant care to regrow a man's lost limb, and yet she was scheduled without rest sometimes for months on end. Was this her price for having a summon that could not fight? Was this why the authorities treated her like property, while giving him special privileges, like enrolling in Manhattan without a summon? Godfrey clenched his fist. His mother was not a slave. One day everything would be on her terms, but for that he had to become stronger. With this thought in mind, he closed his eyes. The next moment, he stood in his soul space. His eyes lit up at the familiar sight of the endless white staircase. It was still as mesmerizing as the first time. He appeared in the first chamber, a wide hall of white stone. At its right end sat Mountain, resting upon a stone throne. His shield leaned against the left arm, rest his longsword against the right. When he noticed Godfrey, Mountain rose, armor creaking before picking up his weapons and kneeling before him. Godfrey placed a hand on the knight's massive pauldron. "Stand up, Mountain." The knight obeyed without hesitation. Godfrey's eyes wandered to the walls. Etched into the stone were drawings, a knight with sword and shield, and beside him, a creature resembling a chameleon, its body twisted with shifting colors. There were other drawings of the beast using the abilities of foes, its face transforming from prey to predator on several occasions. Ancient texts unreadable to Godfrey accompanied the mural, but the drawings alone told enough. So that's what it means. Alchemically altered. Mountain wasn't just a human strengthened to slay beasts. He was the product of something far older, far stranger. The chameleon was a chimera Mountain. Himself was a primal, but together they were something impossible. A hybrid. A summon that could never exist, naturally, and ahead of him stood the second door. Was it another hybrid? He studied the symbol carved into the door, a massive warbow with a lightning bolt etched inside a circle, right where both halves of the door met. From its pillars and design, Godfrey knew it was a door, but it was made of solid stone. Even with Mountain pushing with all his might, it didn't budge. Godfrey finally opened his eyes in the real world. After all, his attempts had failed. He rose to his feet and walked toward his bedroom. He needed rest. After such a long journey, it would be better to recover before diving into research about the Green Gate dungeons. They were spreading across the city now, so it wouldn't take long to find details online. Still dwelling on this thought, he opened the door to his room. But the moment he stepped inside, every instinct screamed in alarm. His body moved before his mind did, summoning Mountain instantly. What's this? The familiar comfort of his bedroom was gone. Instead, Godfrey stood within towering medieval stone walls, their upper corners veiled in age-old cobwebs. The floor beneath his feet was paved with crude, weather-worn blocks. It felt like he had been transported into the bowels of an ancient castle. And 20 meters ahead, two hulking green-skinned beings awaited. Thick, bulging muscles strained beneath their rough hides. Their ugly faces were made worse by the two thick tusks jutting upward from their gums. Bald-headed and clothed only in crude war skirts of animal hide and bone, they radiated brutality. 7 feet tall, brutish and savage, these were none other than orcs. Godfrey froze. A green dungeon had manifested right inside his room. His bedroom of all places. Only now did the words of the news anchor truly sink in. If green dungeons were this rampant, people weren't just at risk, they were living on borrowed time. Quax has, says, les kashij, one of the orcs bellowed in a guttural tongue, brandishing its cudgel. The other mirrored his rage, and both charged. Mountain moved like a tempest. His cloak snapped behind him as he intercepted the first orc's blow, his shield absorbing the impact and reflecting it with such force that the orc's arm shattered. With a swift parry, he turned the second's cudgel aside and slammed an ironclad boot into its chest. The sheer power behind the strike sent the orc crashing into the wall like a ragdoll. As the stunned orc staggered, Mountain crushed the first with a brutal shield bash, the steel rim caving its skull. He spun fluidly, hurling his longsword across the chamber. The blade pierced clean through the chest of the second orc, pinning it against the wall. Kavashi Juvka, a furious roar erupted from above. Another orc leaped from the staircase landing, plummeting down with both feet aimed at Mountain's shield. The collision rang out like thunder, but instead of Mountain falling back, the orc's legs gave way. Bones snapped, blood sprayed, and the creature crumpled in agony. 2 more orcs rushed to join the fray. But Mountain was already upon them. He retrieved his sword mid-charge, parried their wild swings, and cut them down with mechanical precision. Within 2 minutes, all 5 lay dead on the cobbled floor. Godfrey stood frozen, stunned by the towering knight before him. Mountain's golden armor gleamed even under streaks of green orc blood. If Godfrey had ever doubted knights before, he didn't now. Mountain wasn't merely a summon, he was a fortress made flesh. The same orcs who could reduce a bodybuilder to pulp had fallen to him like straw before the scythe, stepping over the corpses to the staircase. Godfrey tilted his head to study his summon more closely. Summoners had unique skills granted through their bonds. Symbiosis allowed them to inherit half their summon's physical strength. Echo, another, allowed them to use their summon's traits or skills directly. Godfrey focused, willing the bond to activate. In an instant, thick golden armor materialized around him, identical to Mountain's. Massive pauldrons crowned his shoulders. A white cloak, with the symbol of the sun, flowed at his back. For all its bulk, the armor weighed nothing, light as air. No wonder you move so fast. The weight benefits you without slowing you down. Godfrey's eyes widened in realization. His gauntlets gleamed with sharp steel tips. Testing further, he summoned an echo of Mountain's sword and shield. This time, when the weapons manifested, their weight slammed heavily against the stone floor. He could lift the longsword with his enhanced strength, but not the shield. Unlike the armor, the weapons had no weightless blessing. With swinging the sword was possible. It felt like handling 22 kilograms casually. but holding it for long would drain him. With time, his body would fatigue until it felt as if he were wielding 100 kilos. He dismissed the shield, letting it dissolve into golden sparks, hoisting the longsword over his shoulder with a sharp, metallic clink. Godfrey followed Mountain up the staircase to an imposing set of doors. With a thunderous crash, Mountain kicked them open, revealing a grand hallway. Towering weathered pillars lined its length, shadows stretching across the cracked stone floor. 4 guards awaited within. But these were no ordinary orcs. They stood 8 feet tall, their skins a deep crimson, marked with grey tribal tattoos. Each carried a massive 2-handed axe, the double blades resting on the ground as they gripped the hafts with ritual stillness. The moment they saw Godfrey and Mountain, they raised their weapons and advanced with heavy, ground-shaking steps. Like charging rhinos, they swung. Mountain's shield absorbed the brunt, the reflected energy cutting gashes across their forearms. Godfrey surged forward, swinging his longsword in a wide arc. The blade carved clean through the neck of the first red orc, its head tumbling across the stone floor. He twisted away, just in time to avoid a crushing swing, deflecting another with a rising cut before shoulder-bashing the foe back. His sword plunged deep into its chest. At the same moment, another blade pierced through from the other side. Mountains. The orc dropped with a shudder. Glancing around, Godfrey realized the knight captain had already dealt with the other 2, dispatching them with practiced ease. Mountain flicked the blood from his sword with a single motion, and Godfrey let out a scoffing laugh, though a smile crept onto his face. It felt good. For the first time in 16 years, he wasn't powerless. He had a summon, and fighting alongside it was exhilarating. Another door, Godfrey said, pointing at the looming double gate ahead. Mountain mirrored his stance, sword resting over his shoulder, and followed without hesitation, with a mighty kick. The door blasted open, hinges shrieking as it swung wide. Beyond lay a vast chamber, the boss's lair. Godfrey quickly deactivated Echo, and the armor crumbled away, leaving only the massive longsword in his grip. He was already beginning to feel drained, and that was a terrible sign because the monstrosity standing in the center of the hall was unlike any orc they had fought before. Beneath the shaft of moonlight pouring through a hole in the ceiling, an 8.5-foot-tall orc loomed. Its skin was jet black, its massive frame encased in heavy iron plates. Skull-shaped pauldrons crowned its shoulders, and in its hands rested a gargantuan axe that gleamed under the pale light. Bare feet dug into the stone, and from its tusked jaws hung rings of obsidian black. Long braided locks woven with beast fangs trailed from its head like trophies of war. Ovia Kabliace, the creature rumbled, its voice devoid of emotion. Godfrey sensed it was asking about the fallen orcs outside, though its tone carried no pity, only cold judgment. A shiver ran through him. The aura radiating from this armored orc was suffocating. This has to be an elite tier. He turned to warn Mountain, but the knight was already in motion. 1. The clash shook the entire chamber. A violent airburst rippled outward, sending dust billowing into the air as Mountain intercepted the downward swing of the Black Orc's axe. Godfrey's hair whipped wildly in the gale. Well, the strike had been aimed at his head. He hadn't even seen the orc move, only the aftermath, and Mountain barely managed to block in time. But the gulf in strength was clear, or the axe sank deep into Mountain's shield, neutralizing its reflection. Cracks spidered across the stone beneath Mountain's boots as his feet sank into the floor. The orc's breath came in low guttural growls. Bot, its bloodshot eyes glowed with murderous hunger. Mountain used blackout state now, Godfrey commanded, darting behind a pillar. He couldn't afford to stand in the path of such a beast. At once the knight's golden armor darkened into a crimson-black sheen, his body radiating, killing intent. With a thunderous roar, Mountain forced the orc back and ripped a deep gash across its abdomen. He raised his shield, instinctively catching the next strike without even glancing at it, but Godfrey's heart sank. The wound sealed almost instantly, flesh knitting together, as if the cut had never existed. The armored orc roared and stomped forward, slamming its feet against Mountain's shield. The knight slipped aside at the last instant, moving with a grace that defied the weight of his heavy armor. In a blink, Mountain's blade thrust straight through the orc's abdomen, the tip bursting from its back. Voshbuka, the black orc, bellowed. Dropping its axe, it clamped both massive hands onto Mountain's shoulders, driving him down with raw force until the knight was forced to one knee. A brutal knee strike cracked against Mountain's chin, rattling his helm, followed by a vicious spinning kick that launched him clean through a stone pillar. Quote, the impact sent a shower of rubble across the hall. Godfrey's eyes sharpened. It's reckless, because it can regenerate. Unfortunately for you two, can play that game. To the orc's surprise, Mountain rose from the debris, his form remolding itself as cracks in his armor sealed. Even his shield gleamed as if newly forged. Regeneration but stronger, an unyielding immortal fortress. Mountain flexed his gauntleted fist as though savoring the renewed strength, then lifted his shield and charged. The orc reeled back from the collision, just as Godfrey surged forward from behind. He summoned the longsword in an instant, timing his strike perfectly. Mountain slammed the orc's skull sideways, with his shield staggering it off balance. Borrowing that momentum, Godfrey drove his sword clean through the back of its head, the blade bursting out its forehead. The black orc collapsed with a heavy thud that shook the chamber. The boss of the green dungeon lay still at last. Godfrey exhaled sharply. That thing was no ordinary monster. It had been at least a 43 elite tier, its strength beyond abnormal. As Mountain's dark cloak shimmered back into pure white, and his armor returned to its golden brilliance, floating above it was a glowing red orb, the dungeon core. It pulsed faintly in the shadows beyond the touch of moonlight. Worth a fortune on the market, but Godfrey wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing strength. It's yours, he told Mountain. The knight descended the dais and grasped the orb. In a flash, its immense mana dissolved into him, vanishing as though consumed. With a surge hit Godfrey instantly. His muscles swelled and tightened, veins humming as if alive. His bones felt denser, his tendons more taut, his very frame stronger. Mountain's power climbed from 30 to a staggering 32 in just 2 days since being summoned. Godfrey clenched his fist and on impulse slammed it into a nearby pillar, tearing a great portion of it off. The stone burst apart, chunks raining across the floor, as if some giant beast had bitten into it. Is this me? He looked down at his bruised knuckles, but the injury was negligible. Once he used Echo, which would grant him Mountain's gauntlets, he would not be hurt, and the damage dealt would multiply. He had seen celebrities and bodybuilders with strong summons lift cars feats that once felt unreal. But now, experiencing this firsthand, the sensation was intoxicating. Power flowed in him like a living flame. It could have gone to his head. It should have made him arrogant. But he had lived too long at the bottom to be blinded by pride. His goal remained clear. He was still far from Siegfried Snowdale and even Isolde. He wasn't there yet. The chamber dissolved, like mist. Stone, blood and rubble faded until Godfrey stood once more in his bedroom. A punching bag loomed before him, the gloves resting neatly on top. Finally back to the real world. Mountain, do you feel at peace? He asked. Why? The towering knight beside him turned sharply, shield raised, sword at the ready. Startled, Godfrey spun toward the doorway. Victoria stood there, her face pale, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The horror in her eyes slowly melted into relief and disbelief. Her heart had nearly given out when she sensed the green dungeon. The moment the boss fell, its leaking energy had allowed her to trace it here. And when she realized the mana signature originated from Godfrey's room, her knees nearly gave way. Gathering courage, she pushed open the door, only to find Godfrey before her, drenched in green blood, yet wearing an exhilarated smile. And beside him a knight. She blinked twice, struggling to process it. Could it be that the dungeon had been abnormally weak? Otherwise, how could Godfrey, the boy who had just awakened a humanoid summon, still be alive? Godfrey, are you all right? Victoria asked in a concerned tone, as she approached just after he told Mountain to calm down. One of the reasons humanoid summons were so looked down on was because the majority of them were golems, clunky and rigid, or worse, the stinking undead skeletons, nothing but brainless puppets for their summoners to control. It made them far weaker than beast summons. Most humanoids lacked good skills and abilities. Most had nothing but heavy defense, but compared to the instincts and raw power of beasts, they were pathetically weak. Yet the knight standing beside Godfrey was nothing like that. Mountain wasn't lifeless. He breathed, and each breath carried a low rumble that rolled across the room, pressing into Victoria's chest, as if she was standing before a massive beast. His aura alone dwarfed what his tear should produce. Even Godfrey could sense it. Other summons simply grew stronger, but Mountain felt different. He wasn't just growing, he was retracing his steps back to his true peak, and that return would only make his growth even faster. It was like the difference between a beginner paying for the gym to build up strength and a seasoned gym rat returning after months away, strength coming back with frightening speed. Godfrey tugged at his top and peeled it off, revealing the body he had forged through years of martial arts and training. His frame was lean, but packed with tone and definition, every muscle a product of sweat and discipline. He had built himself up, not for vanity, but so he could at least stand against low-tier summoners. In this society, almost everyone knew how to fight. If he didn't train harder than the rest, he had no chance. Victoria's brows arched, then she scoffed. "You're fine." She picked up his discarded top and tossed it back at him. "Pull up your pants and go take a bath. I'll inform your mother about the green dungeon gate." "I know you don't want to tell her," Godfrey said with a shrug, "so don't." He turned toward Mountain, half serious, half teasing. "Do you need a bath?" Victoria froze, then shot him a look. "I've seen summons on TV take a bath," he said defensively. "They're not towering 7-foot knights," she replied almost angrily. "It's not necessary. Summons don't smell, not as long as they return to the soul space." Godfrey smirked and raised a hand. "You may go back." The portal opened, and Mountain bowed his head respectfully before stepping into the circle. The room filled with the echo of clinking metal, until the portal closed with a final hum. Victoria's eyes widened. "It's intelligent." "Mountain," is Godfrey's words, trailed off. His gaze shifted to the tall window at the far end of his bedroom. From the 3rd floor, he always loved looking outside, whether at sunrise when he woke or at night before he slept. His chest tightened. Roland Daniel's statue, the great statue raised in honor of his father's sacrifice, stood in the distance. Or rather what was left of it. The statue was headless. Metal constructs clung to its body with ropes, and workers swarmed across it like ants, dismantling piece by piece. From his angle, the buildings hid the figure from the shoulders down, but the desecration was clear enough. "Why are they bringing it down?" he asked, his voice low. Victoria sighed heavily. "It's been there 16 years. The mayor decided to replace it. The Pagoda Guild has been protecting this city and many others around the globe. They've risen to the #1 guild in the world. Honoring them with a statue will win our city their favor." I see Godfrey's eyes stayed fixed on the broken monument. His jaw clenched. The guilds took everything from dungeons, the cores, the beast parts, the spoils, feeding their guild's growth. But his father had fought for the authorities, risking his life to close dungeons before they broke, shutting gates before chaos spilled out, saving lives without thought of profit. And now they tore down his statue for the sake of a guild. It was like showing the same gratitude to a man who gave you a free ride in his car, and to a taxi driver you paid in full. The absurdity made his stomach twist. After a long bath, most of which he spent trying to scrub the anger out of his veins, Godfrey managed to get some rest before dinner. The moment he sat at the dining table, Valentina swept into the sitting room, dropping her bag and approaching him with her usual radiant smile. Victoria brought the dishes to the table, just in time to see her boss, still in her white coat from work, wrap her arms around her son's head and smother him into her bosom. Godfrey tilted his chair back and gave her a fake frown. "My baby, why are you frowning at Mummy?" Valentina teased in a playful tone, her voice deliberately cutesy. She kissed his cheeks, his nose, his forehead, ignoring his muffled protests until he groaned. "I'm not angry at you," Godfrey cried out. Telling her he was 16 was pointless. He'd been saying it since he was 14, and it had never once stopped her, not even on his recent birthday. Valentina finally leaned back with a chuckle, brushing his hair back with one hand before settling beside him. "How was school? Did you make any friends?" Godfrey glanced at her, then at Victoria, as she set plates before them. He knew his mother was avoiding the topic of his summon, probably believing it would only make him feel worse. His chest grew tight as he remembered how she used to climb to the rooftop, just to gaze at his father's statue. How could they do this to her, he thought bitterly. She had carried Amazon on her shoulders alone, and yet the authorities still tore down her husband's memory. She must have petitioned against it. She must have fought. And lost. Maybe it was his fault. Maybe if he weren't so weak, his mother wouldn't have to live with that pain. "Sweetie, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Valentina's voice softened as she caught the flicker of sadness in his eyes. Godfrey quickly forced a smile. "I'm fine." Later that night, Godfrey sat at his desk, laptop open, searching for green dungeons. The results poured in by the hundreds, but as he scrolled, he realized most of them were false alarms, paranoid citizens, mistaking shadows for danger. Then a notification blinked. A new message. The profile picture was of a young girl with the beauty of a supermodel. Golden white hair spilled across a pillow as soft as a cloud, her golden orange eyes gleaming with an almost divine allure. Godfrey's eyes widened. "I sold." He opened the message. "Hey pretty face, we have a competition at the end of the month. Don't miss it." His brows furrowed. How in the world did she get my contact? "How did you get my contact?" he typed back. Her reply came instantly. I asked the headmaster. Godfrey blinked, stunned. Meanwhile, lying chest first on her bed, Isolde chuckled at the sight of Godfrey's profile picture, a half-face shot taken right after a bath. It could have been a good photo, if half his head wasn't cut off. "You're not photogenic," she teased. Godfrey groaned quickly, checking the picture. The rest of the chat was her bombarding him with selfies, claiming she was teaching him how to take a proper picture. In truth, all it did was make his cheeks heat up. Her golden eyes glowed warmly, her hair unbound, spilling freely around her face. She looked enchanting this way far more than the cold, untouchable girl. She appeared to be in class, and Godfrey found himself liking this side of her far too much.